Welcome to Getting Quipy, an interview show with members of the D&D community, from artists to world builders. If you have something you'd like to see on the show, send us an email at quipsandcrits@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter. Till then, enjoy the show. Well, let's make this official. I'm Dan. I'm Dan, the DM of most of the podcasts on the show, and this is my wife, Courtney. She plays Adela on Quips and Crits.
Yep. Hi.
Cool. I'm Grant. I also DM.
But you also do a podcast.
But yeah, I'm the person who says loud things about Dragon Ball Z.
And I'm Paige, and
she also DMs.
But mostly I say loud things about Gilmore Girls.
Well, welcome to what is essentially going to be the second episode of Getting Quippy, the poorly named show where I talk to creators about the things they create. And I was talking with some of the other people in my group, and they're like, "That's not a Dungeons and Dragons related podcast." And I was like, "I know, but check this out. It's Gilmore Girls and Dragon Ball Z. That's amazing. Who doesn't want to, that's fucking hilarious." I saw your podcast a while back. I thought, this is, made for me because Courtney, just some years ago, was just watching Gilmore Girls. And I was like, what is this Dawson Creek crap?
Who are these loud women with all of these feelings?
This is not anime. There is very little satisfying kind of fighting in there. I recall a punch being thrown once or twice.
Well, and that's the thing is, the longer we've had the podcast, the more people we find in that little weird niche between. Because as you said, with we watch an episode of Gilmore Girls and an episode of Dragon Ball Z Kai every week and talk about how they're the same and different. Lots of bad parenting and yelling.
Mm-hmm. Those are the major through lines.
But the funny thing, as we've done it longer, is the first thing we saw was just a lot of guys tagging someone, a woman, in our posts. And so we play a game that's sister or significant other. Because it's one or the other every time. But also just the more and more people we're finding who have either done this with their significant other just outside of the podcast, or people who love both and are like, oh, right. Other people exist in the circle of this Venn diagram.
Yeah, it's funny because the podcast came about just because we had done a little bit of podcasting in the past that hadn't quite gotten off the ground as much as we would have liked. And we were talking about how we weren't really doing anything. We wanted to do something creative because we're both creative types, and our games were the only creative things that we were doing. And so we wanted to do something else. And we were also saying well, what if we can figure out something we can do together? And so I think I was the one that said why don't we do a podcast? And she said, well, what would the podcast be about? And I kept throwing out oh, well, I think the easy thing to do would be to go through a TV show one at a time. So it's we could watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, or we could do a podcast where we talk about Frasier, or something like that. And she had been watching a lot of America's Next Top Model at the time. It
was a very sad time in my life.
It was a stressful time in her life. And so she was watching a lot of America's Next Top Model, and somehow,
it was kind of a joke.
Yeah, just as a joke, I was like, yeah, why don't we do something about Top Model? We can compare that and I don't know, maybe some kind of ridiculous shonen anime.
Probably Naruto, because you were watching that.
Yeah, I was watching Naruto at the time, so that was where the conversation first started, because she was watching a lot of Top Model, and I had the initial reaction of okay, it's Top Model, but as I was sitting there, I was like, no, I'm actually kind of getting into this. I was getting into it, and so I thought, well, that's a podcast. And so we noodled around with that a little bit, and I was like, well, Dragon Ball Z, because that's something that I know a lot about, and she's never really gotten into and doesn't know a lot about. But then you get into the weird thing of Top Model refreshes every cycle, and we played around, no, we weren't sure. And then I saw the Gilmore Girls box set sitting on our shelf, and I asked her, how many seasons is Gilmore Girls? And we looked into it and saw that they had roughly the same number of episodes. And then that's another thing that I'd probably like this show if I sat down and watched it. And you really love it. It's just I've never gotten around to it. And so then it just kind of clicked. We're Dragon Ball Z and Gilmore Girls. We should have come up with that from the beginning. That's the obvious choice here.
Well, and the more we've watched it, this will make zero sense to people who haven't watched both shows. And I'm sorry, but we were watching it and we were oh, if Rory is Goku, then...
Or if Rory's Gohan.
Well, Rory is Gohan, true, but Paris is Vegeta.
Paris is definitely Vegeta.
Piccolo is Luke.
No.
What else? What else have we picked?
Lane is Krillin.
Lane is definitely Krillin. You know, just like little parallels that came out all over the place of how these characters line up.
Kirk is Yamcha.
Oh, Kirk is definitely Yamcha.
Yeah,
because Yamcha jobs.
Yes. And actually, I would say that Dave Rogalski is Future Trunks.
Yeah.
Because he shows up and he's great, but he doesn't quite fit, and then he has to go away, and we're all sad.
Before he's fully utilized to the most of his potential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was Dave Rogalski?
Trunks, Future Trunks.
No, I know that. Who did he play in?
Oh, he's Lane's boyfriend.
We were just catching up on season 3 and the Bible Kiss Bible. We just saw that. Yeah.
And he's the best. He is like I don't like. We could get into arguments over Jess versus Dean versus Logan. We could get arguments over which one of Lorelai's boys is the best, or even which one of Lane's boys is the best. But there is no argument that the best boy in the show is Dave Rogalski, and he was underutilized.
Now, when I sat down and I watched this with Courtney, who has all of the box sets.
Yes, I do. I have all of them.
The way I came to watch Gilmore Girls, because I've watched it all. I've watched all of that, and I'm sure, like, Grant, you probably grew up watching Dragon Ball Z, right?
Yeah, totally.
That was like Toonami, like early 2000s. I could have never drawn a parallel between the two, and then you kind of lining up characters together was like, oh my god, that weirdly fits.
It's just like, wait a minute, how are we the first people who have ever thought of this?
Just say Rory is Gohan and Luke is Piccolo. The puzzle fell completely into place.
They're dads who really care but have no idea how to show it.
No.
Exactly. I came to watch Gilmore Girls because a lot of shows that I watch now and I'm too invested in, Gilmore Girls, Grey's Anatomy.
You like to come in, make fun of my show, and then you get into it.
Yep.
I'm familiar with this pattern. But the thing is, like, when she's watching the quote-unquote trashy stuff, she's also making fun of it, so it's less antagonistic. But I definitely have had that happen where we both are really, really into Top Chef. She has converted me to the long-form reality competition genre in general. When reality TV first exploded, Survivor, American Idol, that kind of stuff, I was, like, super pessimistic about it. I was like, oh, this is dumb. Reality TV is stupid.
And to be fair, it is.
Oh, it totally is. But like, I was super pessimistic and just a Grinch about it for years upon years upon years. And it was only when we got married and we're like sitting around watching TV, and she's like, I really want to watch Top Chef. And I was like, okay, the whole like drama reality thing is kind of stupid, but I like cooking, so sure, I'll watch it. And I have to say, season 2 of Top Chef is on Hulu, and it is a work of television art.
It is drama.
It is like the long-form reality competition show elevated, like the perfect execution of
platonic.
It is, yeah, it is the standard upon which every other competition season of reality TV should be measured. It is beautiful and tragic and hilarious, and Marcel is the perfect villain. And so I know a lot of it's editing, but there are some things that happen in that season. It's like, no, there's no way that was editing. It was somebody in the editor's room realized what they had, and they just like popped a bottle of champagne immediately.
Because that sad, angry boy went to read his rap on the roof.
Yeah, he rapped about how soigné he was on the rooftop because the other chefs were being mean to him, and you can't edit that.
Have we watched this?
No, we have not.
Put it in the queue. Just the tall angry
Season
boy
2
raps on the roof, hook, line, and sinker.
So I'm sure you had us here to talk about, Top Chef, but...
Wait a minute, isn't this Top Chef Ball Z?
I'd watch it.
Don't tempt us.
Well, there was that April Fool's goof that you went all the way through with Gleon.
Code Galeos. That hurt.
We can round back around to that. Grant, how did you come into watching Gilmore Girls?
Honestly, I think that I don't know if I really needed a whole lot of coaxing into it, because I'm trying to think all the way back. The first episode of Gilmore Girls has some pilot silliness, but overall, like, I could see that it was laying a good foundation. But I think really the spirit of your question just being, how did I get into it? The answer is Richard Gilmore. The third episode, I think, of the show is the one where Richard takes Rory out to the golf course.
And Richard is Rory's grandfather.
Yeah, Rory's grandfather. And I really, really liked that episode. And I didn't dislike the first 2 episodes. I was like, okay, I'm getting into it. Like, I understand it's a first season. First seasons take a little bit to ease into. And I'm not going to pretend I was putting it up against a cinematic masterpiece. Like, Dragon Ball Z in general is pretty rough. And especially the beginning of Dragon Ball Z is a little rough. So I was, but I think that Gilmore Girls as a show hit its stride faster than a lot of other shows, like a lot of other WB shows of that era did. Like the other ones that I'm super familiar with are obviously Buffy the Vampire Slayer and then later Supernatural. And in both of those cases, I would kind of almost call season 1 a wash of both of those shows. The first season of Buffy has a couple good episodes, but it also has some really, really rough ones. And same thing with Supernatural. Like, frankly, Supernatural, I would just call the entire first season of Supernatural a wash. It doesn't really get good until season 2. And so I was prepared for that. I was like, okay, season 1's going to be kind of rough. But I really liked a lot of what was happening in that first season. And seasons 2 and 3 were even better. But I think really the answer to your question is just the fact that Gilmore Girls is legitimately a good show. And so it was easy to get into.
How about you, Paige? Courtney was watching Gilmore Girls when it aired. How did you land yourself in Stars Hollow?
Pretty early. So, I'm going to age myself here, and I'm sorry, but I remember when I was a kid and I had been put to bed and I wandered out, and it was the painting episode when Lorelai and Luke are helping paint. And so I knew this was a show my parents watched. I knew it seemed funny and interesting, and I liked it. And so I wanted to watch it and watched it as soon as they would let me. And I don't remember when that was, but I'm sure we got, box sets from the library. And then eventually, I got them for a birthday. And then at that point, I just rewatched seasons 1 through 3 for a while because those were the ones I owned. Because I remember that we had, like, as a family, dropped off the show after season 4. There were some things going on that we were frustrated with at the end of season 4, which I'm not going to say because Grant has only watched the beginning of season 4.
We only just started season 4.
That's where we are right now.
Yep. We know. I told her, I said, no spoilers.
Careful.
No spoilers.
I hadn't really watched that, so there was a time in college. Actually, we got season 4 from the library, I think, and my sister and I watched through it, and we were like, we're done here. We're good. And then later we binged. We watched 4 again and then binged 5 through 7 one weekend. And it's hard. I know this is, some more popular of an opinion with some people than others, but those first 3 seasons still hit a place for me that the later seasons can't. So I've mostly watched those first 3 seasons over and over.
Which is funny because we're also getting into the parts of Dragon Ball Z that I have watched fewer times. Mm-hmm. So I've only watched through the Buu Saga like the once. So once we get to the Buu Saga, it's really going to hit a point where we're both going to be like, I'm pretty sure this is what's going to happen next. It's a little fuzzy. I'm not a huge fan of what's going on here.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah. And the Buu Saga is a part of the story that I wrote off for a really long time. Like, for a long time, I was that guy who's like, oh, it should have ended at Cell. And I even, like...
And you used that voice when you said it.
Yeah, and, like, I have since been disabused of this notion, but I was one of those people who was like, Toriyama originally wanted to end it after Cell, which isn't true. If anybody tells you that, it's bullshit.
I was going to say, I remember growing up, after the Frieza saga, that he originally wanted it to end after Frieza, and it was Funimation that was like, what do you mean you want to work on other stuff? No. You're doing more Dragon Ball Z. So
right, because the American localization company definitely has a say in what the manga writer does.
You get away from that cute little robot girl.
And then I learned a bunch about it, and I found out that wasn't true. And well, you've been finding a pretty decent amount of success in this podcast.
I am just as surprised as you are.
Well, I mean, maybe not. Like you said, you had this really creative idea, and as a guy who's putting out 3 5th edition podcasts, there's a lot of those out there. But there's probably only one Gilmore Ball Z.
Yeah, we are. It's not technically out yet because the DMs running it are taking their time with editing, but
because they're dealing with things like getting married.
Yeah, they have more important things to worry about right now, but at some point we are going to be on a 5th edition podcast. It doesn't have a name yet, so I can't plug it, but once it has a name and everything, we'll plug it. So we might be party members. You might get to learn about Leo and Mel, the stuck-up rich boy and the imaginary cat person who keeps swindling him out of his money.
We are technically, like, a few sessions in. It just hasn't been edited and put out yet.
I think the greatest success you may have found as Gilmore and Ball Z is the Gohan Rory book club.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
We are quite happy with that.
We're very happy with it, yeah. So for the uninformed listeners, the Gohan and Roy Book Club Fund is an idea that we came up with at the end of our second season. It was all Paige's idea. Because we'd had one or two people ask us if we were planning on doing a Patreon. And because, it's a thing podcasts do. And we thought about it, but like the only overhead cost of this podcast is buying the Dragon Ball Z box sets. So it's like $30 every couple months. And I mean, I'm a technical writer and she's a software engineer. I don't know. I'd feel bad taking people's money.
But also, like, we're also lazy, and if we had a Patreon, we'd actually have to, like, guarantee that we were going to get better mics.
We're big into doing charitable stuff.
And we like doing bonus episodes.
Yeah, and we wanted an excuse to do bonus episodes. So we were like, okay. And so she said, what if we did a charity thing? And so we built out the Gohan and Rory Book Club Fund. It's a GoFundMe where we're raising money for a charity called Room to Read. They do educational equality for children in underdeveloped countries, especially in countries where it's harder for girls to go to school. It helps make that happen.
Literacy stuff.
Yeah, literacy stuff. And
for kids who can't read good.
Yeah, for kids who can't read good and want to do other stuff good too. So the way that we do it is we have like stretch goals like a Kickstarter where when we hit a certain amount of money, we put out a bonus episode. So we've done like Paige never drank coffee before.
It's gross, guys.
Really?
She'd never had coffee.
Y'all.
And the Gilmore Girls, the Gilmore Girls love coffee, and Paige never had it. So I made her first cup of coffee, and we recorded it. And so we did that one. But then we also, there's a whole buttload of bonus content for Dragon Ball Z. So we've done Bardock, Father of Goku. We've done Cooler's Revenge, not to be confused with the Return of Cooler 2, Electric Boogaloo. What else did we do? Oh, we did...
Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants.
Yeah, we did Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants because Alexis Bledel is in that. But we also did the Dragon Ball Z filler double feature because a lot of people lamented the fact that we were doing Kai, and so we miss out on a lot of the filler, which most of the filler is just pointless screaming and punching, but there are some good standalone filler episodes. So we did a filler double feature of the episode with Gohan's tutor and the episode where Goku and Piccolo learn to drive, which was definitely the most requested. We hit that stretch goal fast.
The very best episode where they drive? No, I'll just teleport across the world. No, you'll drive 15 minutes to Burger King.
And in that episode, Goku holds up a form of public transit that is currently falling off a cliff, therefore making Goku and Piccolo learn to drive a better Superman movie than Man of Steel. So we did a couple of those things, and we raised a good amount of money at it. Because the other thing we do is we match every donation, And so
and there was a lucky stretch where Room to Read was actually matching $2 for every dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
So for every $1 somebody donated during that short time period around the holidays, it was actually $6 when we had doubled it, and then Room to Read had doubled it or tripled it.
Yeah. So their thing got tripled, and then we matched their thing, and our thing got tripled. So we were like, everybody, it's still only $1 on the stretch goals, but one of your dollars will turn into $6 to help kids in developing countries. And a lot of people piled on and were like, here, and they were given like $20, $25 at a time. And so it skyrocketed. So I don't have the numbers in front of us.
I think it's about 600.
Yeah, we've raised, we they have their breakdown of what actually pays for what. And we've raised enough money now to send 2 girls to school
for a year
and to provide reading materials for a year.
I think it might've been one or the other. I forget if it added up.
I think it added up.
Okay.
But either way, so like, that's been a really cool thing of like, oh, this dumb little podcast where like we laugh about like Cell's weird noodly appendage, and I get really angry about Max Medina has suddenly like actually helped real people in the real world is a little strange.
But it's neat.
It's neat. I mean, I'm glad to be a part of it.
I was just asking Courtney, why would anyone in Stars Hollow dance for 24 hours? And I guess if it does mean
It's something to do on a Saturday night. It's a small town.
I came from a town where the teenagers hung out in a Safeway, like a grocery store, because that's where you went on a Saturday or like a Friday night. And the biggest town event was the annual Future Farmers of America Fair. Like, I can totally believe a 24-hour dance marathon.
Also, the real reason to wipe that smug smirk off Kirk's face.
It's true.
when you did the season 3 wrap up, there was this point you made, and as we were kind of going through some of the season 3 episodes today to just catch ourselves up on what was happening, point was made that in this episode, they're broken down to the core of their characters being so exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
B, the world has been made right by Dean and Rory being broken up. And C, Kirk runs around a crying child with a trophy above his head.
Oh, yeah. So at this point in the show, I was firmly ready for Rory and Dean to be broken up. We were into the 3rd season now, and they'd already broken up once and gotten back together, and it was just so clear that the relationship was not working, and the show was just spinning its wheels on them. So they break up at the dance marathon, and it's a beautiful, beautiful moment where Dean, just... Are you making fun of me?
No.
Okay. I like that you don't elaborate. It's Dean, calls Rory out on admittedly a lot of Rory's bad behavior in front of the whole town and breaks up with her. And so the episode ends with Rory having a breakdown and Lorelai's consoling her, and Kirk is running around the gymnasium hoisting his trophy over the air celebrating. And for me, in that moment, Kirk is the audience, because we all are ready for this to be over, and it's finally over, and the plot's going to move forward, and we all want to celebrate at this point. And we all love Rory Gilmore. We don't want her to be upset, but at the same time, it really is a ding dong, the witch is dead moment, where finally Rory and Dean's relationship is dead. And then, of course, they turn right back around and do the whole evil Dean thing. But, at least for a moment, we can celebrate.
Where have you left off on Dragon Ball Z? I didn't catch the most recent episode.
It was Cell just became perfect.
Yep.
All right, Paige, predictions.
So really the big obvious thing is that Goku and Gohan are in the reserves right now. As I'm listening to this, Goku and Gohan are in the hyperbolic time chamber, the room where you can train for a year in a day. And Goku is very determined to make sure he passes Super Saiyan and that Gohan becomes more powerful than him. So, at this point, we might just get Super Saiyan Plus Ultra 2 and with extra shine power, and that's enough to defeat Perfect Cell. I would like to say that something more interesting would happen, but my prediction with Vegeta was already on point, that he would just muck this whole thing up and give Cell the opportunity to become perfect. So I'll admit I don't have high hopes for being surprised at this point, and I hope I'm wrong.
I don't think you will be surprised, but there will be a little bit more to it than you think.
Good.
I can remember that being an extremely emotional point of my childhood. Yeah. Ooh, and then the Boo Saga one. Ooh.
Oh.
When it happens, I was actually at a point where I was a bit too old to be sobbing at a TV, but I was.
You put away that toxic masculinity. You're allowed to cry at Goku whenever you want.
I was gonna say, we're talking about Vegeta, right?
Okay, you're allowed to cry at Vegeta whenever you want.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to make sure we're both talking about Vegeta. Yeah.
I mean, some cool stuff happens, and that's the gut drop. All right, that's okay. Okay. Anyways, what I found I like the most about Gilmore Girls is it is a show about characters.
Mm-hmm.
And Dragon Ball Z is a show that coincidentally has characters in it, and that's kind of the end. But I came up with Dragon Ball Z strictly because it was colorful, it was violent. I was a kid. Courtney has a deep connection to Gilmore Girls in a way.
Yeah, me and my mother are kind of have a similar relationship as Rory and Lorelai did. So
it's been, though, one of the weird things. This is kind of unrelated, but kind of related. Just it's weird watching it as an adult and seeing what the other person reacts to that you wouldn't expect. So, when we were watching it, I remember that Max Medina existed. And I was going along and I was like, yeah, he's kind of pretty. And, you know, he's a smart teacher man. And the relationship's a little questionable, but it's fine. And then Grant got in and experienced a deep, visceral hatred for Max Medina almost immediately.
I didn't like him from the get-go.
And
it only got worse. And, like, it kind of got better near the end, but it was just too little too late at that point.
Did he look weirdly, like, punchable?
Yes, he definitely has a very punchable face.
Yeah.
But see, my question that they never really wrapped up the end of season 1 after she left him. Did he show up for the wedding and just show up at the altar? Or did she actually call him and say, hey, we're not doing this?
Right.
Yeah, that wasn't... Yeah, I mean...
Like, she called Suki and let her know, but that was about it.
Presumably Suki, like, passed the message along.
Yeah, but I don't know that Max would have gotten that.
The thing that's really confusing for me about Max is actually at the end of the 3rd season, he comes back. And he comes back for one episode, and then he's written off in the next episode.
He gets hit by a bus, right? No,
I
I'm
wish.
Sorry, that's Grey's Anatomy. I'm sorry.
He's written in, and then he's written back out, and he doesn't do anything. And so it's just like, why did you bring... Is this just to hurt me? Like, why... I didn't understand, but I digress. I have nothing intelligent to say about that, other than that it's confusing to me.
But it's been interesting to see how people, like, we react to each other's thing, because there are things that I would not have predicted, like, I would not have predicted how much you love Richard.
Yeah, and, like, I latched onto Richard pretty early on, and, like, and at the same time, like, with Dragon Ball Z, it is funny because, like you said, we watched it as kids, and so our priorities are a little different. And I think that watching it again as an adult, there is more going on with the characters than initially the show gets credit for. But I mean, certainly not still to the same level as Gilmore Girls, where the characters are the whole point. And so it's both interesting seeing what I latched onto as a kid and what I latch onto now that I'd never noticed. And then again, also what she latches onto, not having that nostalgia for it. Because I mean, if you're listening along, I'm sure you know that the fight between Piccolo and Android 17 didn't really do anything for her.
When I was listening to that, I was like, that was a really cool fight. How dare you? That was he showed up with that big D energy and he flexed, but he showed up and the androids are getting to be put on the ropes for the first time. Man, that was so cool.
Mm-hmm. But it makes sense that from a character perspective, not a whole lot's really happening there. So like, it's the kind of thing where as soon as we watch it and she was like, it didn't do anything for me, I was like, I get it, but also it's so cool.
But also you've got those layers of nostalgia where, like, you know it's called the Hell Zone grenade. And as soon as something goes on screen and you know it's called the Hell Zone grenade, things are going down. But I don't think it was ever called out as the Hell Zone grenade in the show.
That's revisionist history from the video games.
So as far as I know, this is called the thing where you make a lot of lights and then nothing happens. Like... It's really cool and well thought out, and then it's futile, and so it's wasted good effort.
Paige, what have you latched onto for Dragon Ball Z?
Bulma.
First, you didn't like Bulma.
My problem here is that I like Bulma as I imagined her to be, and not as the writers give her to me, which are two different characters. Because I feel like there's this character they're trying to, that Toriyama's trying to write, who is a smart, sassy, genius programmer who sometimes gets in her own way and is a little bit vain, is a little bit full of herself, but is kind of like Lady Tony Stark. With a little bit, like, who's more in love with taking baths. Like, I am 100% here for that woman.
I feel like Tony Stark's probably got a couple bath bombs.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely Jarvis draw me a bath.
Yeah. I'm frustrated that a lot of the time there are things that I really want, but they don't give to me. So they don't give me that. They don't give me whatever romance was happening between Bulma and Vegeta that led to them having a baby.
Yeah, that whole thing just happens off camera, which is frustrating.
And so I have sometimes a very masochistic relationship with Dragon Ball, where I love what they almost give me and then never give me. And then I have to deal with what they actually give me.
And that's not to say that you don't like the fighting, because a lot of times you're bored with the fighting, but honestly, a lot of times the fighting is a little bland, especially when you have seen more recent, higher quality action anime like My Hero Academia. sometimes I've been interested because the fight scenes that have really resonated with her have not been the ones that traditionally get talked up in the fandom, but looking at it, honestly, are better. Like, I think your favorite would still probably be when Goku first arrives on Namek.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and just, takes apart the Ginyu Force.
Jason Birder? Where he fights Jason Birder and then Raccoon, and he just one-punches Raccoon?
Well, the thing is, he's got the whole, zen, cool, almost like Kurosawa.
In that moment, he's Toshiro Mifune.
He's Mifune, he's Clint Eastwood, he is cool. That whole, complaint speech in Gone Girl about the cool girl, that is Goku in that moment. He is cool.
Did you like the Nappa fight where he shows up and he fights Nappa during the Vegeta arc?
See, I don't remember that fight at all.
Do you remember the Vegeta fight where it's Gallic Gun versus Kaioken Kamehameha?
See, you're saying words.
This is the thing. This is what I'm talking about, though, right? The moments that are traditionally super hype in the fandom that still get talked about are the ones that are very rooted in just the particulars of this particular new form and this particular attack. And when you really strip all of the nostalgia away and look at it, none of the attacks in Dragon Ball actually mean anything. The biggest difference from one attack to the next is that the color of the energy might be different. And that's it. What is the difference between a Kamehameha and a Gallic Gun? Nothing. They're both big beam attacks.
Well, and it's kind of a thing about who I am and what I'm bringing into it. Because as we mentioned, we play a lot of D&D. But I know nothing about D&D lore. I vaguely know who Bahamut and Tiamat are. Vaguely.
Because I wrote them into my 13th Age character backstory.
And if you ask me what colors they are, my answers would be metallic and not metallic. And if you asked me who Dritz Durden was, I'd be he's an elf. And then I couldn't go much further. I couldn't tell you so much of the lore that is essential for people who really love Ravenloft, who really love Name of Setting #2. I can still run a really good game that is pretty character
almost entirely character driven.
Almost entirely character driven and emotionally resonant, but I also have thrown out everything that is recognizable D&D and run that game with some owlbears. And I still watch Game of Thrones, and I've gotten better, but there were quite a few seasons there where, as far as I was concerned, it was the adventures of Dany and the guy with the weird face. So, I got the name Jorah eventually, but names and lore are not necessarily what I dig into. And so, to tell me that, there is a structural difference of the Kamehameha and the Gallic Gun? See, I've already forgotten it. Doesn't matter to me because all I see on screen are pretty lights, which is reductionist, but it's what it is.
When you strip it down to it, a lot of it, and those are, if you think about the big moments that get hyped up in terms of DBZ fights, they're pretty much all that. Especially, the Kamehameha versus the Gallic Gun, especially because at the time, I think it's one of those Seinfeld moment things where at the time it was really big and hype, but now so much of media after it and before it, but especially after it, has ultimately boiled down to, and then two beams clash and they push on each other. Right. Now that moment feels really generic, when at the time it was a really big deal.
That's kind of the nature of your shonen anime.
Mm-hmm.
The good guys are always going to win. Everything is technically fine in the end. Half the planet was killed. Don't worry, they came back. No big deal. That is a big deal.
Well, and I think part of that is what your genre emphasizes, because we have a lot of genres that we know how they're going to end. Shonen animes, the good guys are going to win. No one's going to get really hurt.
If anybody dies, they'll probably come back somehow.
Mystery stories, for the most part, there are going to be clues. They're going to put them together, and the mystery is going to be solved by the clever detective in the end. If we look at romance as a genre, the guy and girl are going to get together at the end and kiss after having some big misunderstanding.
Even going down into individual series, we know how every episode of House is going to end.
Yeah. But each one of those genres that I just named has a different thing that they're pulling out and giving to the viewer, reader, listener in the meantime. In shonen anime, it's a visual buffet of great action. Like,
and I think it depends on the shonen, because Dragon Ball Z was an earlier adopter, so it didn't have this quite as much.
Mhm.
You can kind of chart the progress a little bit, and I'm sure people who are even more into shonen than me could probably point out how I'm totally missing something. But like, if you go all the way back to like kind of the Mac Daddy of shonen is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and which is weird because like the anime is only coming out now, but if you go back to the manga, like it predates all this stuff. And JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is very much focused on the major appeal of JoJo is we've made these cool fights, and we haven't just made cool fights, we've made clever fights.
Mhm.
And so, like, yes, you learn about the characters, and there are some good characters in there. I really, really love the cast of Part 5 that's airing right now. I know. I think Misa's probably my favorite JoJo character ever, one of my favorite shonen characters ever. And so they're great. But the appeal of the show is still like, here are two people or more, but usually two people, and they each have kind of interesting power sets that they're using in creative ways, and how are they going to use that to outsmart each other? So it's about the fight.
Right.
And then you move over to Dragon Ball, and like original Dragon Ball is a lot of just about gags and comedy and stuff. But once you get into Z, there are moments of it being about a clever fight, because there are tactics used occasionally, but it's the exception rather than the rule. And it is mostly just about, like you said, this visual buffet of like, oh, they're doing really cool stuff. They're blowing up mountains. Look how powerful these characters are. And there's a side of character growth, right? Because like, I would say that Gohan, Piccolo, Vegeta all have really interesting arcs throughout the show.
oh yeah.
And to a lesser extent, Goku, but he's a more static character.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you move then, I think, into the next generation of big shonen, you've got the big three of the early 2000s, Naruto, Bleach, One Piece. And all three of those still are, I mean, Naruto's the only one I'm super, super familiar with, and Bleach a little bit, but they're also still definitely big into the visual, like, power levels and explosions and just really high, powerful stuff that's happening. And yet still, like, the thing that Naruto kind of gets the most, kind of the biggest meme about Naruto is that, like, oh, we're going to fight? First, let me tell you my entire life story. Like, let me tell you about my childhood, is like every fight in Naruto. And you can make fun of it, and it's kind of silly, and it's a little frustrating sometimes, because really, we're 3/4 away into the show, and fucking now you're going to tell me about Kabuto's backstory? But it means that Naruto is a show that is very, very heavily character-driven. And watching it through again as an adult, watching the edited-down versions as an adult, I was able to really get like, oh no, this is just a show about loneliness.
And sad little boys.
And sad little girls, but mostly sad little boys. Shonen's got a gender issue. It's a show about the nature of loneliness and being ostracized and everything like that. And you get that because it's so character-driven. And then moving forward again to today with My Hero Academia, My Hero Academia is an incredibly character-driven show. And that's why I think you like it so much more than you liked any other shonen that I've tried to put in front of you. Because the characters are really, really well done. And even the side characters, like there was, I know you love to talk about that episode with
The Momo episode?
Yeah, the Momo and Todoroki episode. Like, we really get a clear look at Momo as a character, even though she's a secondary character at best. And so you can kind of see how the shonen genre in general has had that arc and has moved and evolved over time. And so it was really interesting. There was a brief moment where JoJo, Dragon Ball Super, and My Hero Academia were all airing at the same time.
That was called the Golden Era.
Like the golden era of like 6 months ago.
Yes.
And I was sitting there watching all three of these shows at the same time, and I was like, they're all the same genre, but they're all so different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know what my point is about that, but it just came to my head, so I said it.
Well, but when we're going for that pure, thing of a visual buffet, when we get mysteries, those are the clues and the understanding of how this all fits together, and it's an intellectual puzzle based around usually a crime. And if we get a romance, like it's a predictable arc, but it's how these two people come together and grow, and so how their characters join together. And so it's totally okay to have a genre that's completely built around always having the same arc. It's just, is the stuff that happens in the middle something you are here for and you are into?
Is the season worth watching the first 3 episodes and then the last 3 episodes? Would that encompass everything you need to know? Dragon Ball Z? Yeah, probably.
Sometimes.
Actually,
Not for Kai.
well, it was the end of episode 3 that he became perfect? Or episode 4?
I think it was episode 4.
Yeah, well, so maybe like the first 4, last 4, because from him becoming perfect, we could pretty much jump to the final battle. You'd miss some stuff, but you'd get the emotional arc.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. Have you recovered from your Emerald City Comic Con contagion?
Yes.
Actually, once again. Sorry.
Speak of the devil, it'll appear.
Yes, now we're sick all over again for a different reason.
Yeah.
Did you find fans there? It looked like you took a picture with Android 17.
We didn't. We just found as many androids as we could.
Yeah, well, that was because that was actually our very good friend cosplaying as Android 17, so...
Yeah.
Well, why don't we swing around to the role-playing part?
Sure, we have our D6s.
Because I really would like to talk about One Punch Man, but, I think we both have stuff to still do today.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I don't have as much context on One Punch Man.
I know he punches things once.
That is one that I have missed out on this generation of shonen.
I would like to tell you there's more to it. He just punches stuff.
Yeah.
Well, he also thinks he's not super impressive, but
Oh my god. All right, so there's 2 layers. Anyways, so basically, we're going to be playing a game called You Are John. I've heard it called some other things, but the game is fairly simple.
I'm familiar with it, although I've never played it.
I'm going to DM. I'm going to have the 2 of you play against each other.
Okay.
We're going to make a setting. I believe the last setting we did was like an old Victorian countryside home.
Okay.
And you're going to have to think of a goal, something that isn't so easily accomplished, but something that is sneakily accomplished. And as the 2 of you begin to roll dice against each other, you have to accomplish the goal before the other one does.
Okay.
We'll be rolling the D6. A 1 and a 2, John is going to have a horrible accident in which his mind shifts back to another, which is when you'll switch roles. 3 and a 4 is a moderate success, and 5 and a 6 is a great success.
Okay.
So the way we're going to start is the 2 of you can give me a setting where John is going to be teleported to.
Castle Winterfell.
I was going to say an aquarium.
Let's go with an aquarium. I thought we'd be themed and make it a Game of Thrones thing, but no, we can do an aquarium.
Yes, because, of our podcast, a Game of Thrones.
Look, this is a game. Whatever. We're good. Aquariums. I like aquariums. They're like zoos, but for fishies.
All right. So an aquarium. So take a moment and to yourselves, think of a goal.
Okay.
Okay, I got one. Hopefully we didn't pick the same one. It'd be funny if we did.
It'd be just like you to pick the same thing I'm thinking of.
All right. So let's roll for initiative.
Oh, I got 1.
I got 3, so I'm guessing I go first.
John, your day started out pretty decently. You woke up in your apartment that is not too nice, but not too bad. You live on an upper floor of an apartment building on one of the New York suburbs, and you traveled into the city so that you could go see the Fishy Zoo.
I love the Fishy Zoo.
As you've walked into the door, you see that there are a few specials going on, and there is a very special exhibit. One that people are claiming is to be a re-engineered megalodon.
Ooh.
It is a giant tank that is in the back of the building that is built into the bay.
Am I allowed to change my goal when I get new information?
So the aquarium is very busy, and you're finding yourself being pushed and shoved as you stand in awe of the sign. You need to buy your ticket. What do you do?
Well, I guess I would try to play it straight, at least at first. I'm going to try to maneuver my way past the very sticky toddlers and get to the front of the line and pay for and buy admission 1 aquarium, please.
All right, as you start cutting your way through this crowd, these very sticky toddlers, you see 2 of them who have both equally spilled the same amount of pop on themselves. They are stuck together and they have moved directly in front of you. Roll me a d6 to see if you can get out of the way or get over them.
I rolled a 3.
A 3. You stumble around them. You're able to just kind of step over them just due to your height. You're losing a bit of your balance, but you catch your feet and you make your way up to the admittance counter. I don't know what the aquarium runs at New York these days, so let's just say it's $40 to get in.
Okay. Do I have $40 in my wallet? I will check my wallet.
Should you roll?
Pull your wallet up to your face and you open it up. A shadow falls over you. Roll a d6.
Uh-oh. 6.
The shadow falls over you, and you know this could be a mugger, so you quickly pull your wallet close to your chest, and it is actually representative of the zoo. You have won a prize in which you are given full access to the entire aquarium for the rest of the day.
Dope. All right. I am going to make I'm going to try to figure out where the dolphins are.
As you kind of look across the room, you see one of those large, what are those called? Legends that you can read the maps off of?
A directory.
A directory.
Yeah.
You see a directory across the room. You can start making your way towards it. As you come up to begin to read it, you see that there's some sort of shenanigans going on the other side. You're able to find where the dolphins are, but the directory seems to grow larger and larger as it's beginning to tip down onto you. Roll me a d6.
Oh, shit. I got a 5.
Okay, a 5. You're able.
The dice gods are with me today.
You're able to slide out of the way, knowing the direction you're going. You just have to head straight down the hall you're facing.
All right. So I will head toward the dolphins.
As you start heading towards the dolphins, you see to your left and your right these massive tanks, walls that have just have windows of several inch glass thick, made between the viewers and the viewees. There's a lot of people still in here as it's still close to the area now, and you see that some of the fish are being fed. And you can see as there is no roof on this particular aquarium, you could actually see them swinging their nets back and forth. They swing down a little bit and they swing up to get it inside of the tank. As you come walking past these nets, one of them threatens to swing and hit you. Roll me a d6.
6.
Another 6.
You wouldn't believe this, but the gentleman who is swinging this is incredibly powerful, nearly Terry Crews level of power. He does hit you, but he nets the back of your shirt, lifting you to the top of the tank. And as you look down, in your hand, you have a ton of fish and a waiting dolphin.
Oh. Well, I jump into the dolphin tank.
All right, go ahead and roll me a d6.
I rolled another 6. Also, swim with dolphins was my goal.
Well,
Swim with dolphins without paying for the swimming with dolphins encounter package was my goal.
now, as you leap into the dolphin tank, you dive in, they swim down after you. But unfortunately, you can kind of look to the corner and you see that the enclosure has broken from the nearby one, and a large shark has made its way and chasing the dolphins away.
I guess I'll roll to not get eaten by a shark. 3. I only kind of got eaten by a shark.
Well, the shark swims over. The dolphins have been chased out. You're just below the surface, so as you begin to pull yourself up out of the water, the large Terry Crews man, he reaches down and he grabs onto your sleeves. You pull yourself out, but the shark has leapt up and he's bitten onto the back of your belt.
Uh-oh.
What do you do?
I guess I'll undo my belt. I don't want to get eaten by a shark.
Roll me a d6.
4.
Paige, I'm trying.
I know. I appreciate it.
I'm really trying.
I know. I see you.
I see it too.
We've all been there.
As you've been pulled up, you're able to undo your belt. It lets loose, and the shark gets pulled back in. Terry Crews, individual, looks over to you, and he says, "Hey, man, I'm really sorry about that. We're going to take the dolphins to another enclosure." And someone goes, "Wow, that's bullshit." And he goes, "Yeah, I know, but, we have to do something. And, we'll get you some free pass for the next few days." He gives you a towel, and he allows you to climb down from the tank.
All right, well, I've got this all-access pass, so I'm just going to hang out until the people come to retrieve the dolphins. I'm going to follow the dolphins through the secret Disney World back channels of the aquarium so I can try to make a jailbreak into the next one.
All right. As you go walking along, your shoes are beginning to slish and slosh across the floors. You do see that there are a group of people, and they're holding in buckets, and they have small books that you could kind of read and denote that they are going to check the dolphins to make sure they're okay. And you can start to follow them. But they hit a crowd, and it gets really dense.
All right, I will push my way through.
Roll me a d6.
6.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Keep going. You're good.
You're hot on their trail. A couple of them kind of look back, and though you may or may not try to be discreet about this, the undeniable of your shoes is just letting them know that you are near them. You're taken outside, and as you look over, you see that there are a few outdoor exhibits, a few areas which you can pet some small fish, some crabs, maybe not crabs, they have rubber bands. You see a sign above the crabs that says if they snip, you can eat. It's weird. New York is aggressive sometimes. You begin to follow them around, and you find yourself just in front of a massive tank where they have what is supposed to be an octopus inside of a jar. The display is made that you can watch the octopus escape the jar.
Is the octopus in the jar? You said supposed to be.
Unfortunately, it's not, and the octopus has reached over the side. Someone calls for Terry Crews guy, and he comes running, but the octopus swings its massive tentacle down to try and rope you up. Roll me a d6. You're going to sue the hell out of this place by the time you're done.
Oh, you damn straight I am. A 2, finally.
The octopus wraps its tentacle around you, and as he tries to pull you back into the tank, you're a bit heavier than he anticipated, and bam, John, you're slammed against the tank. You roll forward, being let go. Terry Crews stands over you, fist fights the tentacle back into the water, and John, your mind shakes back into a different place. Paige.
I reach into the octopus tank to try to grab the octopus that attacked me.
With fury and anger, John leaps to the top of the tank, and the tentacle's just beginning to recede further into the water. Roll me a d6 to try and grab on the tentacle.
6.
Oh my God, you reach and you grab onto the tentacle. It begins to pull you in, but Terry Crews quickly grabs onto your ankles going, "What are you doing?" And it is now a tug of war between Terry Crews and the tentacle for both you and the tentacle. You're in the middle. What do you do?
I try to shove the octopus into the jar.
Okay.
So you pull him out and then you're shoving him back in.
Well, no, he was in the tank. I'm trying to put him into the jar. I'm trying to contain him.
Get in the damn jar.
Yeah, like this thing is attacking me. I want to contain it.
First, roll me a d6 as you try to kick Terry Crews off.
3.
3, you start kind of kicking your legs back and forth, and you do break free of Terry Crews, but unfortunately, with your with no belt, you lose both your pants and your shoes. And with your tighty whities, you slam into the water, and as this octopus begins to spread out, seeing that its full meal has just been given into it, it kind of looms over you like a blanket being dropped from the top of the couch. Go ahead and roll me a d6 as you try to start fighting this octopus.
4.
4, you grab onto some of the tendrils and begin to close it forcefully like an umbrella. You've got it all in one hand, and you see the jar in front of you. It's open. Can you think of a good way to get this guy in the jar as he's fighting against you?
How big is the jar?
The jar itself it's much bigger than a mason jar, but it's, you know those big things of pretzels you can buy?
Yeah. Okay, I got it. Yeah.
Size.
How big is the octopus?
The octopus, like, fully spread out, it looked to be massive, but now that you've closed him like an umbrella, it's probably, like, from, like, head to tentacle, maybe 7 feet, which isn't too big compared to the burly underwear man wielding him.
Yeah, and he's stuck onto my arm.
Yeah.
Can I pull my shirt off and try to get him attached to my shirt instead of my arm?
Roll me a d6.
1.
Ooh.
As you begin to pull the shirt over your head, it catches on your neck, and you forcefully let all of your air out, and you take a mouthful of water in. This racks your head, and John, you find yourself tentacle attached to your arm, shirt over your head. You're almost completely naked, drowning in a tank. What do you do?
Have fun with that one.
Okay, so I'm underwater.
Yeah, you got a jar, you got an octopus.
The octopus is wrapped around my arm, but I got my shirt like over my head, and I'm in my underwear in the middle of the aquarium.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna try to just like slam my body against the side of the tank, arm first, to just bludgeon the octopus into letting go.
Roll me a d6.
5.
5. As you begin to slam your arm to try and get the octopus to let go, you are amazed even at your own strength as the glass begins to shatter and break.
Oh no.
Cracks fill the wall as it eventually breaks out. The water begins to pour. The octopus lets go. and drops to the ground. The water, the momentum of the water carries you out, drops you half naked onto the water a few feet away from the octopus. As you get your bearings to look around, you see that not too far away from where you're at now, the people with the dolphin books have stopped and they're beginning to address the tank.
Okay, so did I get my shirt off away?
All you have is underwear and socks now.
Okay, so I'm in my underwear and socks, in the middle of an outdoor aquarium area, which keeping an octopus in the outdoor section of the aquarium is just asking for that octopus to escape and end up in the Hudson River. And all right, I'm going to fuck. This octopus has really pissed me off. I'm gonna like drop kick the octopus like fucking Star-Lord at the beginning of Guardians of the Galaxy, and then make a break for the dolphins.
All right, go ahead and roll me a d6 as the crowd is losing their mind. WWE The Aquarium.
5.
The octopus is kind of struggling to find its bearing, is being out of waters and something it's terribly familiar with. The large bulbous head picks up and it's starting to find its way to crawl around, but it is met by 2 socks slamming against the head. One of the big eyes squishes under your toes. It moves back several feet, and as you land on the ground, you look back to see the muscular legs of probably Terry Crews. He is going to try and reach down and grab you. Roll me a d6.
3.
He does grab onto your shoulders. He picks you up, but because you're now covered in this viscous fluid from the octopus in the dirty water of the Hudson that was surely inside of the tank, you're able to slip free and get underneath his legs. You now have to try and run through the gathered crowd to see this madman wrestle an octopus. Roll me a d6.
Another 3.
You begin to start pushing your way through the crowd. A lot of people move, and you can see tons of people with their camera phones out. And as you get closer to the end, you see that not only are the dolphins on the right, there's actually a ladder leading up to the tank. The ladder is tall, and directly across from it, there is the exhibit with the megalodon.
Oh, I foresee disaster here, but I'm going to make a break for that damn ladder.
Okay, you run up to the ladder. You're going to be making a running jump on this thing. Roll me a d6.
Another 3.
You run, you jump onto the ladder skids a little bit, but you find purchase. You leap up, you're just barely at the top of this tank. You need to pull yourself up and drop yourself in to that dolphin goodness. Roll me one last d6.
5.
You pull yourself over and you are met by the cool, crisp water of the dolphin tank.
I'm gonna swim with the dolphins.
You finally are swimming with the dolphins. It is a moment of pure bliss before you are taken from the tank and beaten by police.
And probably arrested.
I got so close.
What was your goal?
Get the octopus and get it out into the bay.
Your goal was to free the octopus?
My goal was to free or steal an octopus.
Oh, wow. You were close.
I was so close. Why do you think I was trying to get into the jar and then you drop kicked it? If you had drop kicked it hard enough, you would have done it for me.
Oh, no, that would have been perfect.
I did roll a 5. I think I rolled a 5 or a 6 on drop kicking the octopus.
You did.
Well,
but not quite into the bay.
I didn't quite drop kick the octopus into the Hudson River.
Congratulations on your victory. A strange one that is. And thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, thank you.
If you have anything you want to plug.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, Gilmore Ball Z. You can find us on basically all the major podcast platforms: iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all that stuff. You can find us on Facebook. Just search Gilmore Ball Z. Again, our Twitter handle is @GilmoreBallZ. You can email us at gilmoreballz@gmail.com. Our WordPress site is gilmoreballz.wordpress.com. Just Google Gilmore Ball Z. Oddly enough, it's a handle that isn't taken most places. Yeah, oddly enough, we were able to get that handle everywhere we looked. So you can just Google us and you can find us. We release new episodes every Saturday. Except our bonus episodes from the Gohan and Rory Book Club Fund, which we just kind of release whenever. Right now, for the Book Club Fund, we're only $5 away from funding our next stretch goal, which will be that Paige will subject me to Bride and Prejudice, which appears to be a Bollywood take on Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice with Alexis Bledel, which is why there's a connection. And then $25 after that, we'll be watching the Dragon Ball Z special History of Trunks. And yeah, that's basically what the deal is for us. We're into our 4th season now, and we have a lot of guest spots lined up.
Thanks for sitting and talking with us, and I'll see you on the internet.
Yeah, see you on the internet.